And here I'm showing you my scrap piece of paper, and I just wanted to show you that because I try out everything, almost everything, before I put it on my final piece of paper. I try out different skin color combinations, different shades. I do all this that way I don't end up ruining my final piece of my final picture, and that way I don't feel like I have to restart the whole thing because I'm unhappy with how something turned out. I really recommend when working on something to have a scratch piece of paper where you can try out different things before you put it down on your final piece of paper. And here I'm just blocking out where the stripes are going to be for her hat, and I'm just filling in those stripes with a blue Prisma color, not color pencil, but Prisma marker. And it just saves time when you use a marker in large areas like this. And when working with markers, I know you can't tell it here because it's sped up, but I'm actually working in circles and going back and forth over the previous area and then moving forward a little bit and then moving back, going backwards. It just makes the application less streaky, and it just makes it look better overall when you go back and forth. And here I'm going to start working on the stitching. I used my favorite Castile white color pencil because it's very translucent, and I didn't want the stitching to be too vibrant. Otherwise, it would look more like stripes instead of stitching. And here I'm going to take a dark navy color and I'm going to go in between the stitching. That way it really puts like a shadow in between the stitching, and it makes it look like it's stitching and not stripes. I'm also going to go over some of the stitching area and add like grays to put like shadows in different areas. That also makes it look more like stitching and not stripes. And here you can see me doing it on the top part of the hat as well, where I'm laying down some white stitching. I know it looks really bright here on camera, but it actually doesn't look that bright in person. I'm gonna go in between each of the stitching and put like little dark shadows underneath them and make some of the stitching actually different shades of gray, and it'll just make it look more like it's stitching, and it'll really sink it into the hat. And here I'm gonna start working on the lighter shade of her hat. I use different shades of gray and sandy colors to make her hat was like a peachy sandy color. So to achieve that, I used grays and different shades of sandy yellow colors. Again, I'm putting in where the stitching needs to go, and then I go over it with like lighter shades and make sure I put down where my shadows need to be, and it just makes the hat look more realistic and like it's stitching and not stripes. And here I'm gonna start on her hair. I first block in her hair with my Prisma marker, and then after that I'm gonna fill in all of her hair with that marker. And it's just to it really helps to use markers in situations like this. It saves a lot of time. And here I'm going to start working on her ear, but don't worry about it because I actually didn't like how it turned out, so I'm going to do it over again at the end of the video. And here I'm filling in her hair using a brown. When choosing the hair color or which marker I would use for her hair, I I figured out what color most of her hair was, and I laid that down over all of her hair. And then I just knew I was going to use color pencils to pick up the other different color strands within her hair. When working with hair, you want to make sure that you work in the different clumps of hair instead of trying to draw each individual strand. It'll save you a lot of frustration and time. And if you actually just work with individual strands, it'll end up making the hair look more like straw than hair. So when you work with hair, you want to make sure that you try and fill in where the dark areas are and then where the lighter areas are. And after you do that, then you want to actually go in and try and focus on where maybe some individual strands are. I like to get my some of the lighter shades down, and then I take my darker color pencil and I actually make flicking motions into the lighter shade, and it makes it look like there are some individual strands within her hair. And here I'm blocking in with where her dress is. That way I wouldn't get confused between her dress and her hair that was hanging down by where her dress was. And here I'm just really defining the individual strands and trying to flick some hair around her hairline and stuff just to make her hair connect to her skin so it doesn't look like it's just stamped on there. I'm really working in those dark areas and light areas to build up that contrast in her hair. And here I'm starting to work on the other side of her hair when again I'm blocking in all of the brown color of her hair with a marker. Not only does this save time, but it also makes it so you're not putting too many layers of color pencil on top of the paper, because there is only so many layers of color pencil that you can put down on a piece of paper. And I'm just filling in the really dark areas with my black marker, again just to save time, and that way I don't have too many layers of color pencil down on the paper. On this side of her face, her hair was actually really dark, so I used a lot of my darker color pencils, and I actually used a lot of black on this side of her hair. Even though her hair isn't black, it's just because it was in so much shadow. And again, when working on the hair, you want to work in clumps of the hair and not try and draw individual strands, because it'll end up looking unrealistic if you try and do individual strands, and the hair will just look very piecey and straw-like. And here you can see I'm starting to work in large clumps, and I'm also defining some of the individual strands in the lighter part of her hair where it kind of curls outwards. And I there is like some sections of her hair where you could see through it, and I tried to put white in the in between of her hair area to try and make it look like you could see through her hair. I don't know if I exactly like how that turned out, but hey, what are you gonna do? Sometimes you try stuff and it doesn't exactly work out. It's all a learning process. And here I'm putting in the lighter strands. In her hair, there's actually a lot of orange. So I used some different shades of oranges throughout her hair. When working on people's hair, you want to really experiment and try out different colors. Just because her hair is brown doesn't mean that you should only work in browns. You should experiment with like yellows. Here I use some oranges. Sometimes people have a little bit of red in their hair. You really want to experiment with different colors. And here I'm going to start working on her neck. Again, I am outlining the area that I'm working on. That way I don't lose the area, especially where her her neck meets the dress. You don't want to accidentally, fill in too much area with skin. And her skin had a bunch of different peaches and pink tones, so I used a whole bunch of different pinks and peaches to fill in her skin area, or her neck area. And if you notice where her neck and her hair meet, there is a lot of dark area. Don't be afraid to really put in those shadows. I know I have a hard time with putting my shadows down and putting darker colors in, because it's really scary putting, some dark colors down on top of lighter areas, because you're always scared, like, what if I ruin it? I know it's really hard, but to really make your picture pop and look more realistic, you need to push yourself and put down those darker colors where they need to be. And here I'm going to outline where her arm is. And then after I outline her arm, I'm actually going to fill in her dress area with all white. It's just so I really didn't want to accidentally color in her arm too much and her end up with like a really fat arm. And so I just filled in that whole area with white. That way I wouldn't accidentally fill in too much skin there. Her arm was really in a lot of light, so her arm is actually really washed out. So I used very light pressure, and I actually went over the whole area with white. And we're almost done with the picture. I've actually come really a long way with doing color pencils and artwork, and at the end of the video I will have a side-by-side comparison of when I first started to do this to this picture now. Oh, and here I'm starting to do the ear. I didn't really like how her ear came out. It was in a weird shadow, and it had some purple tones, but I tried it out, and sometimes you try stuff out and experiment and it doesn't work out. The important thing is to just try. Don't be afraid to try stuff out. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but it's okay, because it's a learning process, and you're never going to improve if you don't just do it and try stuff. Okay, again, at the end of this video, I'm going to have a side-by-side comparison. That way you can see how far I've come. And I really hope that you continue with me on this journey and we can get better together. And here I'm just blocking in with a really dark navy color where some of her dress was hitting the light. Alright, we're almost done here. Alright, and here is the side-by-side comparison. I hope you like. Please subscribe and like my video, and come again next time. Okay, bye!